The wine surged through my veins like liquid fire, turning my thoughts to smoke as I fought to keep my hands steady. The dinner table was set like a scene from a glossy magazine. Pristine white china, crystal glasses catching the soft light of chandeliers overhead, the hum of low conversation swirling around me. But none of that mattered. The words were coming, and I could already feel the weight of them before they hit. I kept my gaze fixed on my plate, but I could feel the eyes on me. 23 pairs of eyes, all trained on my every move. I was the outsider, the one who didn't belong, sitting at the table of power, wealth, and privilege. And then, like a thunderclap, William Harrington's voice cut through the polite murmur. My son deserves better than someone from the gutter. It took me a moment to process what he'd said, the words creeping into my consciousness, slow but deliberate, each syllable a cut deeper than the last. His gaze pierced through me like a laser, his voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, but somehow muffled and painfully clear all at once. Street garbage, he continued, with a sneer that would have made any lesser person cower. A borrowed dress, pretending to belong in our world. The room went silent. The clinking of silverware, the low hum of conversation, all of it disappeared. It was just me and him, and I felt the heat of 23 sets of eyes swiveling between us, waiting for the girl from nowhere to respond to the king of the room. I felt the air around me thickening, suffocating me, but I remained still. The wine in my glass trembled, the red liquid swirling with the ache of tension that I couldn't escape. I felt my nails dig into the palms of my hands, trying to ground myself, to not let him see how his words were cutting into me. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice calm but sharp as glass. As I slowly stood from the table, the room held its breath. My eyes didn't leave his for a moment as I continued, the smile on my face tight, controlled. "And thank you for finally being honest about how you feel." I could see the smirk spread across his face, a self-satisfied expression of a man who thought he had won. His eyes gleamed with arrogance, the kind of arrogance that comes from years of getting whatever he wants simply by snapping his fingers. He thought he had crushed me, but what he didn't know was that he had just given me the clearest path forward. I folded the napkin in my lap with deliberate slowness, each movement precise, careful, as if I were still in control, still part of this world he had so generously allowed me to share for one night. I placed it neatly beside my untouched plate of overpriced salmon, my stomach turning at the irony of the situation. "Good night," I said softly, ignoring the curious glances of Quinn's family as I turned and walked out of the dining room. My heels clicked against the marble floors, a steady beat that matched the pounding of my heart, but I didn't let myself falter. I passed by the Monet in the hallway, the priceless paintings on the walls that screamed wealth and power, trying to convince me that I didn't belong. I passed by the servants who averted their eyes as I walked through the hall, and I passed by the Bentley sitting in the driveway, the one that had been flaunted in front of me like a cruel reminder of how little I mattered. None of it mattered anymore. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face like a breath of life. My car, my sensible Toyota, was parked just beyond the gates of this mansion, and the sight of it felt like freedom. Quinn caught up with me just as I reached the door of my car. His face was pale, his eyes red from the tears I knew he didn't want me to see. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice broken. "I had no idea he would say that." I pulled him close, inhaling his familiar scent, the mix of cologne and salt from his tears. I kissed his forehead gently, brushing away the tears that hadn't yet dried. "It's not your fault," I whispered. "I'll talk to him. Make him apologize." "No," I said, pushing him back slightly so I could look him in the eye. "No more apologies, no more excuses." I tucked a strand of his dark hair behind his ear. "He said what he's been thinking for the past year. At least now we know where we stand." With a final glance at his tear-streaked face, I slid into my car and started the engine. Quinn stood there, motionless, watching me as I drove away. The Harrington estate grew smaller in my rearview mirror, its twinkling lights like distant stars I would never reach. But that was okay. I had no intention of ever belonging to that world. The morning arrived with the same quiet urgency as the night before. The city outside my penthouse window was coming to life. Cars honked in the distance, the dull hum of traffic a constant backdrop to the thoughts swirling inside my mind. I couldn't help but think about how quickly everything had shifted. Just a few hours ago, I had been the woman humiliated in front of the Harrington family and their elite circle. Now, I was the woman with the power, the one who controlled the narrative, who could take everything away with a single stroke. I didn't feel gloating. I didn't feel angry either. I felt something far more satisfying: control. I had been underestimated my whole life, by my family, by people in the business world, and especially by William Harrington. Now it was my turn to turn the tables. But I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing this for me, for my future. I sat down at my desk and poured myself a cup of coffee, the smooth, dark liquid filling the silence of my office. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced at the screen. The familiar number, William Harrington. I hesitated for only a moment before answering. Zafira, his voice crackled through the line, strained and clearly flustered. I need to speak with you. This has gone too far. I leaned back in my chair, swirling my coffee in the mug, trying to keep my composure. My fingers tapped the desk as I let the silence hang, letting him squirm. No, William, I said finally, my voice calm but icy. You went too far last night. You humiliated me in front of your entire social circle, made a mockery of me, and now you want me to come back to you with an apology? It's too late for that. I could almost hear him exhale sharply, his frustration boiling under the surface. I didn't mean it, he stammered, his tone almost pleading. I was just drunk. My words were inappropriate. You have to understand, I've always wanted what's best for Quinn. You just aren't what I had in mind. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Drunk words, sober thoughts, William, I replied, the words slipping from my tongue like venom. You were honest, at least. But what you failed to understand is that I'm not the girl you can push around. Not now. Not ever. There was a long pause, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his mind. He was trying to figure out how to spin this in his favor, but he couldn't. Not this time. What do you want from me, Zafira? He finally asked, his voice low, barely concealing his anger. I stood from my desk and moved to the window, looking out at the city below, my reflection cast in the glass. The same city that had once been just a dream, a place that felt out of reach. Now it was mine to conquer. What I want, I said, my voice steady and unyielding, is for you to understand why I'm ending this merger, why I've decided to take my business elsewhere, and why it's not just about you insulting me last night. It's about everything you represent. The old guard, the entitled, the ones who think they can buy everything, including respect. I could hear him muttering something in frustration, but I pressed on. Your company, I continued, represents everything I've worked against. Privilege, arrogance, exclusion. Everything about you, your family, and your legacy is about protecting what's been handed down to you. You've never had to fight for anything. You've never had to earn anything. And that's why I'm pulling out of the merger. Because I refuse to do business with someone who looks down on me, on us. I could feel the tension building in the air between us, even though he wasn't physically here. He was shaking now, I could tell. He was realizing that the tables had turned. I heard him take a sharp breath before speaking again. But you need this deal, Zafira. Your company, your future, it depends on this merger. You know it does. I let out a breath, the sound almost condescending. You think this is about the money, William? It's not. I didn't start from nothing to let people like you define my worth. You've never had to fight for survival, for success. I have, and I built something far more valuable than anything you could ever understand. There was silence on the other end of the phone, the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. I'll tell you what, William, I said, a smile curling on my lips. I'm going to make sure you wake up to the notice from my legal team. And then I'll let you stew in your own mess. I hope you're ready for the fallout. The world will be watching. I hung up before he could respond. By noon the next day, the press release was out, and the world was already buzzing about the sudden termination of the $2 billion merger between Cross Technologies and Harrington Industries. The media had caught wind of it, and by the time the story hit the financial press, Harrington's name was being dragged through the mud. I'd made my decision. I'd broken their precious little world, and they were going to feel it. But there was more to it. I wasn't finished yet. I was already on the phone with Fairchild Corporation, talking through a possible acquisition. If Harrington Industries wasn't willing to step up and change their ways, I'd make sure their biggest competitor did. The tables were turning faster than anyone could have expected, and for once I wasn't just following the rules, I was rewriting them. Hours later, I stood in my office, staring out the window. The phone buzzed again. I picked it up without looking at the screen, already knowing who it was. Zafira. Quinn's voice came through, soft but filled with emotion. "I'm sorry. I had no idea. I didn't know my father would." "Quinn," I said, cutting him off gently. "This isn't your fault." "I should have stood up to him," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've always let him get away with things. Let him think he's always right." "And now you know exactly who he is," I replied, my voice firm. "And so do I. But this isn't about him, Quinn. This is about us, and about me, finally taking control of my future." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. I've been living in his shadow for too long. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to build something with you, without his money, without his approval." I could hear the sincerity in his voice. For the first time, I truly believed it. He wasn't asking me to fix things. He was standing beside me, ready to walk away from his family's expectations, ready to build something real, not something given. "I'm not asking you to walk away from your family," I said, my voice softening. "But I need you to understand, this isn't just about business. This is about something deeper. Something you and I can create together, without the weight of your father's world crushing us." "I'm with you," he said, his voice firm. "No matter what, I'll stand by you." And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. By the time William Harrington learned of his fate, it was too late. The press was already on it. The board was already turning against him, and I had already made my move. Cross Technologies was no longer the small fish in a big pond. I was the kingmaker. And Harrington? He had just been taken down by the very thing he had scorned, the garbage that was now running the show. The wine surged through my veins like liquid fire, warming my chest, but it didn't stop the cold chill of William Harrington's words from cutting straight through me. His declaration of street garbage echoed in my mind, reverberating with an intensity I couldn't shake off. The room had gone still the moment he spoke, and for a second, I thought I could actually hear the air leave the room, sucked away by the weight of his words. It wasn't just the insult. It wasn't even the way he said it, like it was a foregone conclusion, a truth that everyone in the room had already accepted. It was the sheer arrogance, the belief that a man like him could control everything. His company, his son, and even me, the girl who had somehow dared to love his precious boy, to stand in his world despite the fact that I didn't have the right shoes, the right clothes, the right pedigree. But in that moment, something shifted inside of me. The flames of anger, the searing humiliation, it didn't burn like I thought it would. Instead, I felt something else rise in its place, something far colder. It wasn't rage that fueled me now. It was power. The kind of power that comes from knowing you've been underestimated for far too long. I stood up slowly, deliberately, keeping my eyes on William as he smirked, enjoying the spectacle. His gaze met mine with that cold superiority he thought was his birthright. His pride was palpable, suffocating. But as I looked around the room at the faces of Quinn's family, frozen in discomfort, unsure of how to react, I realized that they weren't looking at me the way they once did. No longer was I the insignificant girlfriend. I was someone more than that. Someone who would not be humiliated without consequence. The entire room was waiting for me to crumble, to apologize, to do what women like me were supposed to do when faced with men like William Harrington, apologize for our existence. I smiled then, not out of kindness, but as a statement. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Harrington," I said slowly, my voice a calm, calculated contrast to the storm of emotions bubbling beneath the surface. I forced myself to meet his eyes one last time, letting the silence hang between us like a blade ready to drop. "And thank you for finally being honest about how you feel." The words landed with a finality that cut through the room, and I saw his smirk falter, just a little. It didn't matter. He was too far gone to realize the mistake he had made. I carefully folded my napkin, smooth and precise, and placed it neatly beside my untouched plate of overpriced salmon. I didn't need his pity. I didn't need anyone's, and I sure as hell didn't need his approval. Good night, I added, turning on my heel, my heart hammering in my chest, but my steps resolute, determined. As I walked past the Monet in the hallway, past the servants who avoided making eye contact, and out toward the front door, I felt a small, flickering satisfaction. I was done. I was done playing his game, done pretending I wasn't the threat he had clearly underestimated. But the real work hadn't even begun. I slid into my car, the engine purring to life beneath me. The chill of the night air was a welcome relief as I drove away from the Harrington estate, the towering mansion growing smaller in my rearview mirror. Quinn's voice echoed in my mind. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." His words rang with the familiar tenderness of someone trying to protect, but he didn't understand. What had happened wasn't his fault. What had happened was far bigger than his apologies. It wasn't about him. It was about me. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even him, dictate who I was. The city lights blurred past as I drove, a reminder of how far I had come from the girl who slept in shelters, who counted every penny just to eat. I wasn't that girl anymore. I reached for my phone. It was already buzzing with missed calls. But it wasn't Quinn. I didn't care about Quinn right now. I cared about what was coming next. I dialed Danielle, my assistant, as I merged onto the highway. "Danielle, I need you to do something for me," I said, my voice steady. "Of course, Miss Cross. Is everything all right?" she asked, the concern in her voice making me pause for just a second. I couldn't let myself falter. Cancel the Harrington Industries merger. The words were cold, deliberate, calculated, and they felt like freedom. There was a silence on the other end of the line. "But ma'am, we're supposed to sign the papers on Monday. The financing is complete. Due diligence is done." "I'm aware," I replied, my grip on the steering wheel tightening. "Kill it. I don't care about the fees. Send the termination notice to their legal team tonight. Cite irreconcilable differences in corporate culture and vision. Make it clear why we're walking away from this." "Are you sure about this?" she asked. I could hear her fingers already tapping away at her keyboard, her mind racing to catch up. "Yes," I said firmly. "Let him wake up to the news. Let the world know exactly who he is. And let him understand that a woman like me won't be tossed aside without consequences." There was a moment of quiet, and then she spoke. "Understood. I'll handle it right away. Anything else?" I paused, thinking for a moment. "Set up a meeting with Fairchild Corporation. If Harrington Industries won't step up, maybe their biggest competitor will." "Are you thinking of buying his rival instead?" she asked, a note of surprise in her voice. "Why not? Garbage has to stick together, right?" I hung up the phone and let out a slow breath. This wasn't just about vengeance. It wasn't about ruining someone for the sake of revenge. It was about power. The power to take back control over my life, to stop letting people like William Harrington dictate who I was or where I belonged. By the time I reached my penthouse, the quiet relief of the decision had settled into my bones. I poured myself a glass of scotch, savoring the burn as it slid down my throat. This wasn't about William or Quinn or their family anymore. This was about me and the future I had built, the empire I had crafted in the shadows while everyone else thought I was playing small. I wasn't playing small anymore. The phone buzzed in my hand again. I glanced at the screen. It was Martin Keating, Harrington's CFO. They were already scrambling. It was almost too easy. "Zafira, it's Martin. I'm sorry to call so late, but we just received a notice from Cross Technologies terminating the merger agreement. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Martin," I said, my voice cutting through the phone. "Tell William to ask himself. He'll give you his version. Good night." I hung up the phone, feeling the satisfaction grow within me. The pieces were falling into place. The empire was mine, and soon everyone would see it.